Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's edition of Beyond the Vault. With me, of course, is the one and only Andy Scheckman. You can find him at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
AC, it's been too long, brother. I'm great, thanks. I hope you are too. Thanks for having me back again.
Always exciting to have conversations with you, Andy. And in the last couple of days, I think we're hitting what Cliff High is talking about here, kind of a new era in time where we're going to have capitulations on every front. And I say that because so far, you and I have been in a way, outside the tent, pissing in for a number of years, talking about the economy. And yet, what we are saying is not reporting by mainstream news, but that seems to be changing. And it changed in a big way just a couple of days ago, where Mark Zuckerberg finally wrote his letter apologizing, saying he regretted what he had done. He said that the Biden administration had pressured Facebook to censor COVID content. There was also the Afghanistan withdrawal content, and of course, the Hunter Biden laptop. So now we know the laptop's there. Hunter's been prosecuted for some of the elements in it, some of his business partners also. We now have the GOP coming to the conclusions that the Biden family had received millions of dollars from foreign governments. So all of this is coming out now into the open. And that also leads us to probably an issue with the last election. We won't go into that too much here. We're still on YouTube. But again, we're just now finally having this big capitulation. And we're saying, hey, is it too little, too late? Or is it an indication here that reality is about to assert itself? And as Cliff High says, and you and I have talked about this many times, Andy, you can ignore reality all you want, but you can't ignore having the consequences of having ignored reality. And I think this reality here is hitting a lot of the normies in a big way. And we might be there here too very shortly on the financial markets. That's where I want to spend the show here today and have a conversation with you. You haven't been on in the last 2 weeks. So you and I were busy and had to reschedule a couple of times here. But what was on your radar in the last couple of weeks? And bring that into the context now of this new reality taking form here from this admission from Facebook and all the censorship going on, which we all suspected and knew, but now we finally have admission in the mainstream news. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality, and so many of the things that I've talked about and others have talked about for a very long time. People would say that that's conspiracy. I mean, I remember going back several years ago before I started doing YouTubes. I spoke at a conference, and I presented, I thought, incredible fact that J.P. Morgan had been manipulating the metals market. I showed all sorts of stuff that to me it was just a slam dunk. And someone in the industry, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's an older guy in the industry as a commentator. He's a newsletter writer and very well known. And he got up and more or less kind of disrespected me, I guess you could say, saying, yeah, that's not true. For all of you who heard that, I wouldn't buy that. The JP Morgan traders could never keep their mouth shut long enough.
Right.
I don't buy that. Subsequently, when we find J.P. Morgan paid a $920 million fine to the Justice Department for manipulating the market, he called me and, much to his credit, said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. You were right. I'll be damned.
Right.
And when we look at so many of the things that this industry talked about and would have been kicked off of YouTube for talking about, deplatformed. Yeah. Sarah Westall, our mutual friend, actually had her GoDaddy accounts taken away. And almost all of the things that we talked about in a respectful way, trying to use as much evidence and fact as we could, not only was censored, which to me was more pressing and disturbing than the actual pandemic itself, but you couldn't even say the word pandemic or corona or any of these things. You couldn't say Hunter. You had to talk in euphemisms and jump around and say the corona sickness or whatever you wanted to say.
Yeah.
The cerveza sickness, rather, as Johnny Bravo would say. You know, we were laughed at by the normies, as Cliff would say. And maybe even more troubling than all of that is that all of these things that you said at the onset here, JC, I would venture to say have not been covered by the left media. They're not really talking about all of these revelations. And a lot of this really kind of came home to me when I was on an airplane flying home the day after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of former President Trump about, whatever
the immunity
yes,
decision. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm flying home, and I'm sitting in first class, and there's TVs on everyone's seat, and I could see that I'm sitting in the last row of first class, and I can see, half of the TVs are on CNN and half are on Fox, and I'm not, mainstream, right? I don't even watch much in the way of news, but on Fox they had Trump coming out and giving an interview or giving a statement right after the Supreme Court made an announcement in his favor. And bang, they went straight to this thing. And CNN, I'm watching it, and not a word. They didn't go anywhere, not a word. And so the point of it is that what I find very frightening about all of this is that, yes, this validates what we have all known and believed, but it's also creating greater divisiveness amongst the populace, because now we are vindicated and validated, yet the other side hasn't heard that side of the story. And it will create a greater clash when you try and confront it. What do you mean you haven't heard? You didn't know that was true? That's not true. Yes, it is true. Didn't you not? No, it's not. And that's the kind of crap that I think that we see right now. And I think people need to trust their gut. There are a lot of things that are happening that are true. But I think you have to get your own house in order first. You can only save the world one person at a time, starting with yourself and your own immediate family, because there's still too much divisiveness, because we don't have unity in the way that the information is being sent out to the public. Only half of the public and the people watching alternative media represent but the pimple on the elephant's rear end. So the most of the public doesn't even know that these things have come to this direction, and I find it to be very distressing.
If we are to base our opinion on what's coming, Cliff High's WebBot data is suggesting here in some of the immediacy data, and it was in this particular article here on Substack, released as SOAS. He was making the analogy there, but if you guys go listen to that, he talks about September being a month where the mainstream media, for some reason, is now, because it's coming out in such a big way, in big droves, that the mainstream media has to report it. And it's similar to what happened just after the debate. Remember, just a couple of weeks before the debate between Biden and Trump, the mainstream media was saying he's sharp as a tack, he's at top of his game, he's exhausting all his junior staff with all his vigor and all that stuff. And then suddenly it's like a big reversal. Oh no, he's seen how it has to go, right? So that was the first inkling of the breaking of the spell. And what Cliff is suggesting here is that September could be that on steroids here on many different fronts. And I think that first letter from Zuckerberg here could be the precursor to that. And at the same time, it brings us in dangerous times, because the people who are willing to go as far as controlling and censoring Americans through third parties here, as the case is for Facebook, they're doing that for a reason. And if they can no longer do that, they might try different avenues. We saw the CEO of Telegram be arrested in France just a couple of days ago. So the war is hot here for the narrative.
But you got the guy from Rumble leaving the European Union because he's afraid. I mean, it's really scary. And maybe I didn't follow it close enough, but didn't Zuckerberg perjure himself in front of Congress saying that this didn't happen a year ago?
So too does Mallorca. So the DHS guy, he had said that he was not involved in that in any way. So that's absolutely perjury there.
Where's the accountability, man? And that's the thing. If you and I perjured ourselves in front of Congress, where we'd be right now.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. It's this.
Andy, it goes even further than that. It goes even further than that. There's 51 intelligence agencies who wrote letters saying that the Hunter laptop was just a Russian propaganda thing. And they knew they had the laptop all along. So now we're getting into election interference. Again, touchy subject here for YouTube, but nevertheless, okay. So thank you everyone for joining us here today. We just wanted to set the stage for this reality that's forming around us. And we encourage you to speak about this to your friends here, because again, as Andy says, otherwise we risk being sidelined, even though a lot of these, what were originally conspiracies, are now conspiracy fact and have been proven. So let's get into the markets. a lot of weird things happening, but I wanted to point to this here too. You and I have talked about this a couple months ago, that Warren Buffett seemed to be strategically getting out of his positions, getting big into cash, and it seems that he's been accelerating that here too as of late. I think you and I talked about that 2-3 weeks ago again, and now just recently again moving more into cash positions, apparently understanding that something is just around the corner. So before we get into the metal stuff, can you talk about briefly what you see on the stock market right now, and if you're expecting some big corrections here, and is this why perhaps people are still worried here with the Warren Buffett indicator that something nasty is just around the corner? Andy.
Not just Warren, but all of the insiders, Bezos and Zuckerberg and the CFO from Discover Card, and all of these big, CFOs, CEOs, and owners have been selling. Most of them sold by the end of the second quarter. Coincidentally, just happened to be out of the way of the big drop that we saw that one day. Of course, it's come back, but the point of it is that I think what they see is a market that's gotten way, way, way ahead of itself. The fundamentals don't support the PE ratios, don't support the prices. It's a market that has been driven higher by irrational exuberance, if you will, where 5 or 6 stocks have led the way, when at the same time the Russell 2000, which is a broad measure of the economy, really has been in the toilet. Almost all the stocks way down, yet 5 or 6 stocks have led the way. And when you see the insiders selling the way that they have, I mean, it should be a wake-up call. Warren Buffett is known as the greatest value investor. If he's sitting in cash, he doesn't see value anywhere. And that should be a wake-up call for people. And yet it just continues to march higher. And now we got the stock market at or near all-time highs, and we're still 50% away from the Fed's target on inflation. And guess what? We're going to pivot, and we're going to drop rates and reignite inflation and just watch where it goes. So as many people think as there could be a massive pullback, and there is part of me that feels there could be a collapse, I also think the market could roar higher in an inflationary tsunami. But in measured against ounces of gold, it will continue to lose value. Mm-hmm. And as gold has outpaced the S&P 500 for 25 years now, it's averaged 9.9%. And with the S&P, reinvesting dividends over the same time period, about 9.5%. It's doubled the performance of the 10-year Treasury. People don't really notice that. But when we're talking about traditional assets, I guess I'm torn. I'm torn on one hand, believing that maybe they are able to ignite a market rally, a super cycle of commodities and equities that go to the moon based upon a dollar that's getting inflated away to zero. But measured against gold, it will continue to lose value. On the other hand, I do understand what you're saying, and I see the fact that we're at record, PE ratio with nothing in the way of dividend yields in a market that doesn't justify these high values, in a market that is very much overstretched. And I would just simply say caution is certainly called for. It's not something that I have any taste for right now. I would just simply say you're not finding value in the stock market right now, even a little bit, when measured against the risk. We look for the term asymmetrical risk, where what gives you the lowest downside and the best upside. And to me, equities are certainly not asymmetrical in their value. To me, they have tremendous risk for upside that, I think is not really what I'd be looking for right now. It's not about return on your money. It's about return of it in a world that is as over leveraged and undercapitalized as this one is. To me, it's a fool's errand to try and chase these gains in the stock market that is inverted, if you will, with just a very few stocks holding up the entire market.
Like you say, getting your money back to you, but in my mind too, now with all of this craziness, I'm thinking about, well, how do I get my money out of harm's way more than anything else?
Right, because the day that everything collapsed, do you want to tell me it's just coincidence that Robinhood, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, all of them just happen to be inoperable? Sorry, there's a problem, a glitch. They all didn't work when the market fell by 1,000 points. Is that really the kind of liquidity that you want? And it's a fallacy. People think they have such amazing liquidity, but if you couldn't even access your account on all of these major platforms when it was the biggest point drop ever in the history of the Dow Jones, I mean, think about that, and then think about what our good friend Bix always talks about: you don't hold it, you don't own it. Yeah. The removal of counterparty risk. This is exactly the type of situation. I remember in early on in the pandemic, I told my nephew, I said, hey man, he had a big 401k, and Fidelity is the custodian, works for a corporation. I said, dude, just sit on the sidelines for a little bit. Let this all play out. This is unknown to all of us. No one knows what's going to happen. Sit on the sidelines. So he calls Fidelity on a Thursday, sits on hold for 2 hours, calls me back at the end of the day, said, Andy, you won't even believe what they told me, that after 2 hours, they came on the line and said, we're so overwhelmed that we have to schedule an appointment for you, and the first one is Tuesday. So when you talk about, these types of deals, the insiders will always not only be in long before everyone else. Think about the central banks buying gold the way they have for the last few years, as the American public isn't involved, and they'll be out before everyone is. Think of what these insiders have done. By the end of the second quarter, they're out. They don't care if they forego a little bit of gain. They just don't want to get whapped. And maybe that whap is coming. Certainly by those actions, it would make one think, that seems like a crumb that's pretty hard to ignore.
I was listening to Greg Manino. I've been paying attention to this guy maybe for the last 10 years or so. He's a trader. He shows people how to make money.
He's great. I like him a lot.
Stocks. He's got a good analytical mind. And I think for the most part, looking at his bets on the Fed, whether they raise rate or reduce rates over, like he's got a pretty good track record, kind of seeing what's priced into the market and all that. And I say that, and I continue to watch this guy 10 years later. But in this particular one, a week ago, he's expecting the Dow and gold to meet up here at 8,000. He has an analysis as to why that might be, and he was talking about an $800 silver. And the crux of his message was there's a setup being played here, and he was not necessarily talking about the great taking, but he's showing you here that the game is being set up here to really pull the rug out from the unsuspecting people, and that there's insiders, of course, playing this game. And he's saying that we're getting close to that. So I don't know if he's picking up on those same indicators that maybe Warren Buffett is, and that's why Buffett is out in cash right now. But I encourage you guys to go watch this video if you want it.
To his point, and I watch him too. He's a good guy, smart.
Yeah.
1-to-1 ratio is not crazy. It happened in 1980 at around 850, the Dow Jones and gold in that range, 8.25, whatever.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about the most powerful players in the world, the central banks buying it at a level the world has never seen. When you talk about the head of the Dutch National Bank continually talking about revaluing gold, when you have Senator Cynthia or Congresswoman Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming saying, we need to create this Bitcoin strategic account by revaluing the gold that the Federal Reserve holds on behalf of the Treasury. You keep hearing gold revaluation. At $8,000 an ounce to me is not crazy at all. And by the way, at $8,000 an ounce, it adds $2 trillion free and clear to the Treasury general account, if that's what gold was. So that if all the central banks are buying gold, why not think of gold at those levels? And if you take the mining ratio right now between gold and silver, it's 7-to-1. That means it's coming out of the ground 8 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. And you put gold at 8,000 and you divide by 7. Well, that's the mining. That's $1,142 an ounce. If you take 8,000 and divide it by roughly 42, which would be man's ratio over the last 150 years, you're at $190. So I don't know how high silver goes, and I don't know how high gold goes, but I would say this: when the insiders are selling at the end of what is a 40-year super cycle in equities, as interest rates have fallen straight down since 1982, at the same time, you see the most sophisticated money in the world, the central banks, really since 2017, have been buying and repatriating their gold at a level the world has never seen. And we'll talk about silver hopefully today too, because we're seeing that even in spades. But you could see that the big players are leaving one exit or one market and moving quietly into another, and both are getting very little in the way of attention. So that is typically how it would work. They're repositioned long before the public says, well, wow, how did I not notice that? And it wouldn't surprise me one bit to see Greg, and he's not, he has no dog in the fight. He doesn't, he speaks on liberty and finance a lot, and I work with those guys, but he doesn't have any affiliates. He's not doing it to make money. He's he's a very smart analyst and someone I would.
Yeah, and he shows you how to make money when the market's going down and up. So either way, so he'll talk, he'll talk in both directions of the market, and I appreciate that from him and how to navigate this. People are asking for the link in the chat. Let me bring that in the live chat for you guys here, and let me go to the Rumble feed as well. Here is the link to that Greg Manino interview. Maybe you and I should invite him on and have this conversation about his analysis and where we go moving forward.
I'd love to be on with you because I've never talked to him in person. I've emailed with him before, but smart guy, and he's one of the good guys.
Yeah. So let's go back to the introduction here. We're saying that it appears that we're close to some level of capitulation here, not just in our markets, but in politics and religion, everything else here right now. There seems to be a new reality forming, and people are going to have to reevaluate their worldview. And so let's talk about the precious metals and how, as you saw many years ago, the manipulation at JP Morgan behind the scenes, and nobody believed you. You were pointing at very specific things and painting a picture, connecting those dots. And then eventually you were vindicated with this almost $1 billion fine that JP Morgan paid for doing just that, manipulating the silver market. So let's paint the picture here with some of these connecting dots. So in this one here, China's strategic silver takeover, a calculated move to drain the West here. They're selling silver at 10% higher than the West. I thought that was an interesting article. We'll get into all of this in a moment here, but BRICS also, there's a lot of signals growing, shifting away from the US dollar. So that has to be taken into consideration. We have also kind of this, I guess, emerging technology where people are realizing here that silver is going to be used not just in EV. In some cases, people will say that EV is on the way out, but we also have the new electrics coming out here in this big innovation boom. We're talking about the 0-point energy. We're talking about the releasing of the patents. Trump has alluded to this already. So we might be getting more and more than just the EVs here pushing in for silver as a commodity for these new technologies coming out here and this innovation boom. We also saw that gold is the second largest asset right now being held in global reserves, an important part not to neglect, and also preparing for the worst. A Polish central bank again here becomes the biggest buyer of gold. We've alluded to them in the past. Let's start on this one here, this Jerusalem Post article on silver. I thought this was interesting. There's a takeaway from me here, but what do you make of this one here, and what do the audience need to know about this article, Andy?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that they are the second largest producer of silver in the world. Everyone always talks about them being the largest producer of gold in the world. They're number 2 in production of silver, and they probably produce more than they tell us. They've always been a net exporter of silver. They are now, as of this year, a net importer of silver. Big deal. I did an interview with Sean Kunkun, the head of Dolly Varden Silver recently. Super nice guy. And he confirmed what I'd heard elsewhere. And that is that China is flying all around Latin America, paying a massive premium to the West to buy doré, silver doré, and silver concentrate, unrefined. And paying a massive premium to what the West is willing to pay, and then shipping it back to China, going directly to the source, getting it in unrefined form, shipping it back to China, and refining it. Therefore, it doesn't come off of an exchange and have a direct reflection on the price or in terms of how many ounces they're getting. It's a very opaque, private way, cost-effective way for them. China is a master refiners. They refined 100% of all the rare earths last year. The Eurasian continent produces most of the rare earths, 85% or so. They refine 100%. So they bring the silver in unrefined form back to China and refine it. India has bought over 700 million ounces in the last 3 years from the West, and now they're buying from the United Arab Emirates, and anywhere that they can, they're buying silver. But when you talk about China, they have a $4 premium, over a 10% premium to the West price on the Shanghai Metals Exchange. This is arbitrage. They will, any Western trader who has the ability to buy in the West and deliver in the East, so $4 is a hell of a premium to do so. And when they work on, little tiny spreads at 15%. That's enticing as hell to these people. At the same time, they're the second largest producer in the world, and now buying unrefined doré and concentrate all around Latin America, paying double what anyone else will. As you can see, silver is more strategic than we are being led on to believe. It's a very, very big deal. And going from net exporter to net importer is another very big deal. So you are cutting down the supply. You should be increasing the price. And again, because of the way they do things, because of the stupidity where on the LBMA, which has the London Bullion Metals Association, which has been bled down to its lowest level ever in the history of its exchange in terms of silver, they're trading upwards ends of 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day. That's 3.5 times annual global mine supply when they only have 300 million ounces available to deliver. They're trading 10 times the amount of silver they have every single day. Mm-hmm. And this is creating massive distortions that the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians are saying, that's freaking awesome. Thank you. We're going to stand for delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's how they're going to win this game, because they never stood for delivery. No one ever did. And
so on top of the dislocation with the price discovery, the shenanigans they're playing at these exchanges here, the 5-to-1 ratio or the 500-to-1 ratio here in some cases, as have been reported to Congress, we're also seeing now the supply demand getting bigger and bigger here with all these new technologies, and that too is creating now this was my takeaway from this article, the potential for this silver squeeze here. Speak about that just from a fundamental point of view on how much is mined, where it's going, and how much we need for it moving forward in technology, and how that could entice a lot of investors around the world to get on the bandwagon very quickly, and how this could push prices up parabolically. Andy?
Yeah, well, there's a 260 million ounce shortfall this year projected, about the same last year. It's now this is a continuing problem where it's not going away, right? This is a structural problem in supply versus demand of, let's say, between 800 million and 1 billion ounces mined, only 25 to 30% come from companies that actually mine the silver. The rest is byproduct mining. Mining other metals. So it's becoming harder to find. And there's a far, far greater demand than there is supply. And the uses are expanding, military uses, green, digital, and monetary uses. And when you talk a silver squeeze, I mean, COMEX is 15 or 1600% rehypothecated, meaning we all own a contract. Well, one of us will get our silver, the other 15 or 16 will get cash settled. If we're lucky, this is force majeure. It's a default. Take a look at again, like I said, on the LBMA, 90+% of all of the trades that they do are paper trades. They're not backed by anything. So if I'm going to trade, 10 times the amount of silver that I have in any given day, and all of a sudden these people say, no, we're going to stand for delivery, thank you very much, a silver squeeze becomes very probable. And when you talk about the industrials, say, a guy like Elon Musk or Apple or Samsung or Sony or any of these people that need silver for their products, these companies, at some point there's going to be a battle between the investors, the hedge funds, and the industrials who need it to make their product. So yeah, a silver squeeze to me is something that could very well happen. And it would happen not by the public all buying an ounce of silver like we saw in 2021. That's not how it happens. It will happen on a level where central and sovereign banks around the world and massive corporations stand for delivery on the contracts that they have, which is a privilege you can do, which no one ever did. And when they do so, they don't get the metal. And that's when you start to see a very big problem. I think countries...
The default,
Yeah, and I think these countries know they don't need to shoot missiles at us. They just need to blow up one of the major commercial banks by standing for delivery on all the commodities that they're naked shorting, and bang, you win the game. And so, I think this is a real deal. Could it happen? Absolutely. Not the way that the silver squeeze Wall Street silver crowd thought it would, but it certainly could happen on a much, much bigger scale.
Well, the point is, there's many avenues to get there, and they're all colliding at the same time if we're looking at all these vectors. So we need to consider that in our analysis here and how much we allocate to this particular metal. Let's look at the de-dollarization a little bit here. You and I have been talking about this for a number of years, and it seems to be accelerating here. We're seeing more and more signals that people are shifting away from the US dollar. There's a graph here on the chart. Speak to why this is also important, as we keep in mind here our ability to maybe stay out of harm's way here with our hard-earned money. Andy, why is this important for us?
Well, because you got 100+ countries that have been invited to the new BRICS meeting, 59 that have already formally applied. this is a substantial growing entity, all of them, and it's growing rapidly in interest specifically. I mean, let me see if I have the exact number. I want to say I thought it was 150 plus countries that were 126 nations are set to attend the BRICS Municipal Conference, showing an increasing interest in joining the bloc and moving away from the reliance on the US dollar. This growing momentum among developing countries reflects a broader ambition to strengthen local currencies and diminish the dominance of the US dollar. I just read that, but okay, so you're inviting 126 countries to the BRICS meeting in Russia, and 59 have formally applied, and they've agreed in principle to a common settlement currency called the unit backed by gold. And this is, we keep seeing it. It's accelerating. And it's accelerating in every metric in terms of legitimacy. You put all these countries in the fold, you're talking the majority of human population, not to mention the majority of commodity production, 2 or 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals, the majority of land route and sea route shipping lanes, the Red Sea and the Straits of Hormuz. All of this stuff will be controlled by this new group of this new block of countries that are doing things in a different way than the West does. Where right now, the West, when I say the West, meaning the United States and England and the European Union, are sanctioning over 60% of the underdeveloped countries in this world right now. 60% the West is sanctioning, and they're all like, you suck. And if we found safety in numbers and something legitimately to transition to, I think there are a lot of countries that would be willing to take that chance, especially when they look back over their shoulder and see what's happened to this country and how it's falling apart inside and saying, is this really even something we want to hitch our wagon to at this point? This looks like a better option. And it's gaining legitimacy, that line of thought.
Right. And so to his gold, going back to this article here, the chart of the week, gold is now the second largest asset being held in global reserve. Talk about
in the history of the euro, it's never been that. Now the euro is third. And gold share has fallen. The dollar share has fallen. Obviously the euro share has fallen, and gold keeps going higher. And so what we see is the hegemony is gone. The supremacy isn't. You can see we still have the supremacy, was that say 48%. Well, it used to be closer to 70%.
Yeah.
And so the supremacy is still there, but the hegemony isn't. Right. And you can say that the European Union is a failed experiment that's starting to get worse and worse and worse, at least in terms. And again, they're doing the same thing that we've done. They have confiscated the Russian or sanctioned the Russian European Union bonds, but instead of outright stealing them, which we've done in the West, we've just stolen the interest, which amounts to a few $1 billion to give to the form of a loan to the Ukraine. Well, this stealing and defaulting on treasury obligations and using it to fund the foe of the country they're in the midst of a war against is enough to make all of the other countries say, I will never work with these people again. They're tyrannical, they're hypocritical, and what they do and have done for 5 centuries is worse than what we do. And so for them to impose this stuff at the same time, they're broke and they're insolvent. And look at their countries. Look what's happened in the UK. They try to raise rates, their pension system blows up. Their immigration system is a mess. They're all divided. I mean, all of these things, you look at the West, we're all broke, we're all insolvent, we're all coercive in the way that we do things. And these are things that the rest of the world is saying we've had enough. And they do it in the right way, methodically, slowly, not too fast. But remember, the BRICS is 18, almost 19 years old right now.
Yeah.
But I do think it is accelerating here as we get to this meeting in October, as we get to what could be the biggest election of our lives here in the United States. Things are starting to get real pretty quick.
And we're seeing more and more of this gold buying sprees around the world. Talk about Polish central bank here. I think their target right now is to get to 20%. To make up 20% of their bank's reserve. Why is this important too? And speak to the audience, maybe who haven't seen our previous shows about jurisdictions around the world now looking at gold and also naming their accounts the gold revaluation fund. Why is that important?
Well,
it's right in your face, but most people are ignoring that very fact here. Go ahead, Andy.
This one to me is nuts. So, okay, they were the biggest buyer of gold in 2023. Poland was. And they're well on their way to being one of the biggies here again this year. One of the things that I have had success in over the last 4 years is looking at all the crumbs that have been dropped at our feet. And I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to put them together. Part of the problem with a fragmented, what people's gathering news in a fragmented style, if you don't pay attention every single day, try to be able to come on a show like yours and sound like I know what I'm talking about at least a little bit. If you miss a week, you miss a year's worth of, a year. Wasn't it Lenin who said something to the extent like there are weeks that feel like a year and years that feel like a week? Something like that. Anyways, this is one of these deals where if you're not paying attention continuously, you won't be able to put them all together. But if you look at all the crumbs, which in and of themselves have validity, but put them together, it's like, holy crap, this is a puzzle that I see. And I would go out and say these things. And for 3-4 years with you, there was no one else saying the stuff that I was saying on your show for a long time. And now everyone's talking about this, the BRICS and Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar and the Belt Road and all this stuff, right? Well, here's one of these crumbs. And I don't know if I've never heard anyone else say it, but me. So is it a crumb or not? I'll let you all decide. I'm going to read something to you. And to me, it's really eerie and really freaky. Okay. So the head of the Polish National Bank, remember, they were the largest purchaser of gold last year. And, maybe these guys want to clear their conscience. Maybe these guys are talking to their friends and family and say, listen to what I say here. I can't really say it to you, but listen to what I say. Now, you listen to what Adam Glipinski says, and you tell me, is this spooky? I'd love to talk to Cliff about this one, but here we go. So in 2021, they started buying a bunch of gold, and they were the biggest buyer of gold last year. They're doing it again this year. And Adam Glipinski, the head of the Polish National Bank, was asked about this. And he said, holding gold is a matter of financial security and stability. Now get this, JC, here's where it gets crazy. Gold, this is quotes, this is what he said. Gold will retain its value even when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electric accounting records. Let me just say that one more time. It will retain its value when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electric accounting records. Of course, we do not assume that this will happen, but as the saying goes, forewarned is always insured. And the central bank is required to be prepared for even the most unfavorable circumstances. That is why we see a special place for gold in our foreign exchange management process. I was watching a movie not too long ago, JC, with my wife several months ago. It was a rainy day, and it was a freaky movie. And at the end, I realized that the Obamas were the producers, and it was about the internet going down.
Oh, leave the world behind.
Yes. And now you wonder, put these crumbs together. You keep hearing about these black swans or a EMP or the grid or the internet, and the market collapses a few weeks ago, and all of those platforms weren't working. I mean, or the Microsoft deal. I mean, is it weird that Adam Glipinski said that? I don't know. You tell me. I find it to be very interesting that he says he holds gold because when the system goes down, someone destroys all the electric accounting records. And even the way he says it, when he says, when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electric accounting, who's that someone? I mean, the whole thing is just, is it a crumb or am I making something out of nothing? I don't know. I will tell you that I have followed all of these crumbs, said this stuff publicly, and more often than not, they bear fruit. Just like when in March of 2020, when knucklehead, what's her name? She tore up Trump's, what's her name? Nancy Pelosi. Viruses can live on paper currency. I mean, that's it. We're going to be going down the CBDC road. And of course, the Boston Fed has already created the CBDC in with the help of Lael Brainerd and others. These things, I think, have a way of rearing their head again. And see, we told you we were nervous about this, and we didn't hide it. So the point of it is, to me, that was what I wanted to bring up about Adam Glipinski and Poland being massive buyers of gold, and then mentioning, hey, when someone cuts off the power to the grid or to the accounting system, well, this is what gold is for. So I just thought people might want to hear that. To me, it's pretty interesting.
It's very interesting. I found the quote you were looking for. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen.
That's what I'm getting at. And I think the next few weeks leading up to the election, that's what, that's going to be true. I mean, look, if, does anyone really think it's going to be something eventful won't happen? God willing, it doesn't. I mean, it's hard to believe it won't when you see the desperation they've gone to for the last couple of years just to distort things and do things, that everyone says, is this really happening?
One of the things that was also being censored heavily, I remember I had lost a YouTube channel on the Hunter Biden laptop, but we were also talking about election integrity, and that was a key battleground here for censorship. And we just had here in the last 2 weeks the CEO of Smartmatic also, who was just arrested, taking $1 million bribes to change vote results. So this too is now coming to the front. So a lot of it is happening and putting these guys in a terrible bind here moving forward. When you and I had Bill Holter on the last couple of weeks, he's also of the opinion that they just can't afford to have an election. And to some extent, like, I have to agree. And just in the last couple of weeks since Kamala was installed, she hasn't done any media interviews. So again, it's like they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I don't know. I saw an Alex Jones interview yesterday or the day before suggesting that whoever attempted that first assassination target on Trump might be back at it here, because that's still an option for them. They can't let this guy go. And they just now in the news today, or was it yesterday too, special counsel Jack Smith re-indicts Trump now with a narrow set of accusations after the SCOTUS immunity decision. You and I were talking about this at the beginning of the show. So we're seeing more and more craziness on the censorship front, and we're seeing now more legal battles. There's another article about how many legal attempts have been thrown at Trump and also at RFK. Yet the criminality, the money the Biden administration is taking, and the secret documents, none of that has been adjudicated ever. Oh, he's just too old and he's too senile. But man, we live in a two-state country here when it comes to justice. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, and that's not lost on the rest of the world. And that's why,
right.
Kind of hijack Bill's comment. I call it too stupid to be stupid. He says too stupid to not be planned. I mean, this Jack Smith, what a loser. I mean, how do you continue to do this in the face of disrespecting the highest court in the land, and half of the country wants to rip your neck off because you continue to do this and disrespect the most important institution in the land, which not only is the presidency, but the electoral process. And it's pathetic. It truly is. And the judicial system, it's pathetic. But this is what I'm getting at. Like, all of these things are not, you put them all together, it becomes a much more pressing situation. It's not just the mismanagement of the dollar, where we're creating 100,000 in debt every second. It's not just the weaponization of the treasury market or the executive order to go green or all of the other things we've done monetarily and fiscally irresponsible, but it's what we're doing to the fabric of the country. And this is exactly it. And it's really awful.
Rob Schneider, the comedian, he says, count them, 7 different lawsuits against Trump and 9 different lawsuits against Kennedy. I think it's more than that for Trump, at any rate. He says the Democrats more resemble some Asian military junta than the United States political party. Yeah, and that's what you're saying. The rest of the world is seeing that as a complete banana republic shit show.
Well, normally they would say banana republic is when you're over 100% debt to GDP and do those kinds of things. Well, we're at 123% debt to GDP, and we do those kinds of things. We're a laughing stock, and that's the worst part about it. It truly is. And then you look at, she wants to if she wins, she wants to, if you're making over $1 million a year, get the rich. She wants to raise your capital gains to 44%. Well, they're the ones that own the majority of all the stocks. So they're going to dump their stocks and watch what happens to the market. How about the Bitcoin whales who have over 100 million in assets and have massive, massive unrealized gains that she wants to now tax unrealized gains at 25%? If you're making over 100, you have over 100 million. What's going to happen to a market like Bitcoin? How about all of the CEOs, NVIDIA and of Apple and of Bezos? I mean, bang, it would all collapse. Is that what they're trying to do?
Yeah. Pretty much. Well, that's what Manino is getting at. They're trying to do this. They're trying, like, this is a big scam, and it's coming to its end here somehow. And
It's
then,
just awful, JC. It
yeah,
truly is, and it makes me nauseous. Like, I can sit here and talk about how stupid we are monetarily and fiscally,
mm,
but this kind of stuff becomes frightening. This is about, the destruction of everything that is holy to this country. The First Amendment, of course, the elections, the judicial system, the immigration system, and just basic safety. Going out into an inner city and seeing a ball game and having dinner, in downtown Minneapolis, which was Little House on the Prairie my whole life.
mhm.
That's why I left, or any of the other major inner cities where you talk about St. Louis, where the fourth tallest building just sold for $3.7 million, 44 stories, but it sold for $206 million, in 2005. Now it's sold for $3.7 million. The former One AT&T Center. That's just one building I always mention because it blew me away. There's a lot more like it.
Yeah.
And this urban doom loop that happens around it, where the buildings leave, they're unoccupied. The bank takes it on the chin. All of the establishments that spring up around it, well, they're gone because it's not safe anymore, and people are leaving. So more people leave because of that, and then it's just a self-reinforcing doom loop. And then where do we get all our tax revenue from? I know. Let's raise taxes on the rich. Well, they all leave, and they're going to Florida, and they're going to Texas, and the really rich ones that got 100 million, they're going to say "F you" to the U.S. and they're just going to pull up tent, and they're going to go on their yacht in the middle of the Caribbean and say, "I'm done. I'm never going back." If you don't think that'll happen, if all of a sudden there are people with $3 billion in unrealized losses and they're going to pay unrealized gains, and they're just going to happily pay 25% tax in unrealized gains, and then when they sell it, 44% in capital gains, I got a bridge to sell you. Ain't going to happen. They'll just go.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing. They're so stupid in what they're doing. They're destroying this country. The current administration has done more to harm our country than any external foe ever could have done. And if we lose this opportunity to at least take back the country from a standpoint of law and order and integrity, and respect, we're in trouble. I really do believe that. Be the best thing for my business, but the worst thing for my kids.
To me, it's even worse than that, and maybe we could end on this. It's giving me a stomachache just thinking about it. But remember that clip? I put it on Twitter a couple of months ago. Somebody had put a collage of all of the mainstream news referring to Trump as Hitler-esque, right? They had different variations on that theme, even though none of his rhetoric touches those subjects whatsoever. And this is the most absolutely asinine thing I've seen here in the last couple of weeks. The new Kamala DNC slogan was joy, and they kept talking about and repeating joy, strength through joy. And I looked it up on Wikipedia. It was set up in 1933 as a tool to promote the advantages of Nazism to the German people. Through events and promotion, this propaganda was also intended to prevent dissidents from anti-state behavior. So, like, are you like, these are the people who are calling Trump a Nazi, yet they're using the same rhetoric and the same playbook. And when you talk about Nazis, talking about book burning, we just had Mark Zuckerberg admit now that he was basically modern day book burning here on social media. Andy, it's a crazy show. No wonder people want to get out of the system and take their money out of harm's way. Hey, listen, let's talk about some of the specials. I don't know if these are current with me. We still get a lot of emails, people looking for the pre-65 or the junk silver there in the United States. What's the inventory for that now, and what's your prices currently on this? And
I actually have junk silver better than that right now. Let me pull it up real quick. I'm so sorry. I should have been ready for you on that.
Hey guys, let me bring up the link for you guys. If you're looking at getting some silver or some gold, go to beyondmystic.net/silver. There you'll see the contact form. Just fill it out here, and Andy and his team will get back to you here with all those prices. But Andy,
we can do 210 on the junk, and I don't know if they're $half. They'll be quarters and $half.
Okay,
but that's as good of a price as I've seen in a very, very, very long time. The Eagles are not on special right now, but in some cases we can even do better than that on larger orders. But everything is on sale right now. What we do have on sale, it would be 1/10 ounce silver Britannias at $4.99 a coin, silver Philharmonics at $3.10 over spot, platinum Maple Leafs at $80 over spot, and backdate Krugerrands at $60 over spot. But everything is still on sale. Everything is still on sale compared to where it's been. And I swear to you, the one thing that is making me think that it's going to be hard you're going to see premiums go higher, is all of a sudden it's really hard to get silver bars, like really hard. 10 ounce, kilo, and 100 ounce, and it's getting harder. I have stockpiled hundreds of bags of junk silver because to me it was the best value, and I just keep buying them and buying them and buying for inventory. We have good availability of a lot of stuff, but that can change in the blink of an eye, and I'm shocked that we do. We're this close to, the BRICS meeting and the election. I don't know what people are waiting for, to be honest with you. If you're waiting for a pullback, please don't, because I think it will be very difficult to get product, especially if we see something that wakes up the public. But as we get closer to the end of the year, the mints run out of supply anyway, and they say, well, we'll just make product for next year, 2025. So there is no backdate stuff right now. It's all brand new 2024 for the most part. It would be wise to, if you're thinking about purchasing, to consider, doing something, at least a little bit of it now before it gets harder to get.
For sure. People are asking about, I know the junk silver is impossible to find here in Canada, very few supply. So lucky on you guys on the American side. On the Canadian side, if you guys go to mfbullion.ca, they're currently the new special for the week are these 10 ounce silver bars, all at $2.49 over spot Canadian. Really cool prices there as well. Given what Andy just said, maybe pick up a few of those bars here if you can. So that's mfbullion.ca if you're on the Canadian side of the audience, or go to beyondmystic.net/silver and fill out the form here, and Andy and his team will get back to you here with the specials on gold and silver for the American side. Andy, 51 minutes in. Anything else you wanted to share going into this? I know the election is kind of like, it's almost a moot point to me at this point. It's just noise really to everything else that's going on, and I'm trying to stay focused on where things are going, how to traverse this period, how to keep, like I said, your hard-earned wealth into safety, but also, I guess, to bridge that forward to our kids, to whatever the new iteration is going to be. It very much looks like we're at the end of a system. People tell me all the time, "Oh, JC, you worry too much. It's it's just a boom bust echo cycle." I'm like, no, dude, this is not a boom bust cycle. There's something bigger happening. Is it a 400-year cycle? Some would go even further, but we're moving into a completely new system, and it very much behooves the people watching the show to educate themselves, to listen to all of this stuff, and to take the proper decisions for themselves here, so that they can move through those two systems with least pain as possible. I think that's the order of the day, at least for myself. What would you say to the audience members with respect to that?
I would say be prepared, because look, Powell just told the world this week he's going to cut rates, and this is at a time when the stock market is at an all-time high, when house prices are pretty damn close to all-time highs. They tell us that employment is at all-time highs. Of course, they just revised, 818,000 jobs, but they keep telling us how GDP is growing, how the economy is strong, employment is strong, and yet inflation is still 50% higher than the Fed's target, even though that's a lie. Why would they be lowering rates then? If everything is so great and moving in the right direction, doesn't that mean they have it dialed in?
We have the strongest economy in the world, as we're being told.
They're doing it because he knows the numbers are a lie. He knows it. And
just on that, sorry, I need to interrupt you. I forgot to bring this up. You and I have been talking about the Bureau of Lying Statistics for a number of years, and we just had the biggest correction in their history, 818,000 fewer jobs than initially reporting. We're getting the capitulation now on all these fronts. Andy, sorry, I just needed to add.
No, that's okay, man. I'm glad you did. Even things like, the way they used to report inflation, unemployment, it was called U6, I think.
Yeah.
All of the people who they've given up, that there isn't a job for them, they're not counted. Everything that the BLS talks about, it's more and more lies, and it's inflation, and it's unemployment, and these just happen to be the mandates of the Fed: full employment and stable prices. So they're going to pivot at a time that's only going to reignite the stock market, reignite inflation, reignite asset prices, and do more of the same stupidity. Instead of letting Mother Nature correct and do things the right way, they continue to mess with Mother Nature and keep giving another shot of heroin, another shot of, and all it will ultimately do is make the pain that much worse when it corrects. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see the stock market roar on one hand, but in measured against the number of ounces of gold, no. I just think people need to be prepared. This is too bizarre to even try and think about how it all plays out. But what they're doing right now is about the dumbest thing that they could possibly do to the future health of this country. But they're trapped. You know, they don't really have much of another choice unless they just let the system break apart. And they're not going to do that heading to election. So this is a very interesting time, as the Chinese curse says, may you live in interesting times. I think the bottom line is, if you're not thinking like a contrarian, you're in trouble. And this is the time to do it.
I love it. Thank you, Andy, for those last kind words of wisdom. Thank you so much for watching us here today, guys. Please join us again at 3 o'clock Eastern for the next edition of the Beyond the News Breaking News with Janine and myself. So we'll see you again in 1 hour. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, JC.
Have a great day.
Well, brother.
All right.